Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chattin with the Rivals. Following Ryan Walters' hiring at Purdue, we are joined by Orange and Blue News, Doug Bucshon, to talk a little bit about Ryan Walters and what he expects at Purdue.
But yeah, Ryan Walters, a really big part of the Illinois season this year as a defensive coordinator. Um, they were a very aggressive defense. They got a lot of personal accolades, individual accolades after the season, especially Devin Witherspoon and the cornerback and defensive tackle Johnny Newton, two outstanding players, and player development is another big piece for Ryan Walters. Some guys whose careers were kind of languishing. He put them in the position to succeed. He had Kirby Joseph, a safety drafted in the third round by the Detroit Lions after spending most of his career at Illinois playing wide receiver and not getting a lot of playing time. So he's a very, very popular coach with the players, has a dynamic personality, and you may have seen that already over there when he was introduced at Purdue. I think the fans are really going to like him. They probably don't know a lot about him yet. I'm sure there's a lot of Twitter buzz and social media buzz about him and the hire. But once they get to know him, they're going to love him. He's a straightforward guy, a straight shooter who's going to answer your questions honestly in the press conferences, and a guy who is kind of a defensive savant. He really knows how to put players in position to succeed. Always seems to make the right call during games when it comes to coverages and blitz packages. So a really good young mind and a really good hire for Purdue.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk on social media. People weren't too happy because it's not the quote unquote sexy hire, I guess, being a defensive minded coach, not having maybe the national recognition in terms of the media and people outside of the college football world that really know what they're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I noticed the same thing that you just mentioned. He just knows how to take over a room, and he always feels super authentic. And say what you want about Jeff Brom. I mean, he succeeded at Purdue, obviously, but it never felt like he had those same characteristics. I know you probably hadn't talked to Brom as much as I had in the last few years, but it's just like a breath of fresh air, and that's weird to say coming off a coach that leaves after leading you to the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, I did have some interaction with Jeff Brom when he was a coach here at Illinois,
Oh yeah, yeah.
quarterbacks
Hmm.
coach. Very bright guy and known for his offense. Obviously, a dynamic offense. The vertical passing game, and so that's going to be a big adjustment, I think, for Purdue fans going from an offensive minded coach like Jeff Brom, who brought in the air raid offense, which has a long history at
Hmm.
Purdue with past coaches also. And it is going to be a big adjustment for him. A key for Ryan is going to be who he hires as the offensive coordinator. I don't know if you've heard any buzz along those lines, but he will need to have an experienced guy to come in and run the offense and call the plays, and um, and hopefully for Purdue fans, they get another guy who runs the air raid. That's what they
Hmm.
love over there, and it's been good to them. And but that's going to be a really big key hire for Ryan Walters.
Yeah, he didn't mention any names, but he did say in his press conference today that he has some guys that he's had an eye on for quite some time. So I would anticipate that position getting filled fairly soon. But yeah, it would be weird if Purdue didn't go with the air raid, if they didn't get an air raid guy. But I think Ryan Walters, he talked a little bit about it at the press conference again today. He's not kind of, I don't get the sense that he's set in his ways because he talked a lot about, and I know he mentioned this when he was hired at Illinois. He's gonna adapt his defense to the players that he has. He's not gonna be stuck in his ways to where if cornerbacks can't play man as well, he's not gonna put them in man situations that much. Is that something that you had noticed after watching him the last 2 years?
Definitely, but I think he's more likely to do is if he doesn't have a player that can play that style of defense, he's going to find one that's on the roster or go out
Hmm.
and recruit one. And he found those guys. He like I said, he took Kirby Joseph off from the offense, playing wide receiver, made him a safety, or and with the entire field in front of Kirby, he's a guy whose athleticism and quick twitch was perfect for the position. Devin Weatherspoon, All-American corner, had those skills already, and he knew what he could do with them. He knew he could play press man coverage. He also knew that he'd get pass rush up front with
Mhm.
Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph, two really good D tackles. So that's a big piece of it. I think you're right. He's not going to put corners on an island out there if they're not capable of playing man to man defense, press coverage defense. So he will definitely change according to the skill sets that he has. He's done that when he hasn't always ran this particular defense, this
Mhm.
aggressive defense with the press coverage. In fact, it was something that he and Bret Bielema kind of sat down when Bielema was first hired and built the defense from scratch. So he can coach various styles, various types of defenses. He's very smart, and he knows that he can't put you know, square pegs into round holes. And I don't think he's going to try to do that.
Now, do you know what his responsibilities were in terms of the recruitment of players? Was he like the lead guy for all defensive players?
He was involved with them,
Mhm.
and he would speak with them, and him and Coach Bielema were closers. But specifically, he recruited safeties.
Yeah.
He was in addition to the defensive coordinator, he was the safeties coach, and he recruited those guys. He was not a tremendously on hands type of recruiter. The rest of the defensive staff did most of that recruiting, but you can tell by his personality that he's a guy that is going to do really well when he sits down in the living room, of a prospect's house, and he's gonna know how to talk to the kids, know how to talk to the parents, know how to talk to the high school coaches, and I think he'll be a really good recruiter for Purdue.
Yeah, I mean, just I'm sure you saw that clip. The first team meeting, he gets up there and he wins over the room by giving Devin Mockabee a scholarship. Like one of the first things he does after becoming the head man. Just those types of things are going to go a long way with the locker room in terms of keeping guys. Obviously, you're not winning football games right now, um, but I mean, he's checking all the boxes so far. Going off that point of keeping guys around, have you heard any buzz of any recruits that are teetering on decommitting and possibly following Walters or any guys on that Illinois defense?
No, not really. I think Coach Bielema has known that Ryan Walters was going to be on the short list for head coaching job at several
Mhm.
different places, and I think they prepared for that. He got Bielema got involved in calling kids and talking to him about what might be happening, and I don't think it hit him by surprise. They knew that he was head coaching material, and he wasn't going to be stick around in Champaign for the rest of his life. So, and we talked to all the defensive recruits. One or two are still kind of trying to figure things out, but the rest of them are planning to sign on December 21st with Illinois.
That's kind of the same same thing as Purdue. A lot of their guys, they're staying committed. I know they have 4 or 5 decommitments. Two of them are from Kentucky and end up following Jeff Brom to Louisville, so it's not a huge surprise. And the other two are running backs. So that's just the nature of the beast. But we will see if Walters can bring in any Illinois guys. I know that that might not be sounding too good for you guys, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty late in the game, right? National
Mhm.
Signing Day is just 1 week from today, and I think most of the kids you'll see some late flips. You always do, but I think most of the kids are and their families are locked in, have been locked in for several months, and making a change this late in the game is definitely a major life decision if they do decide to flip. There's one kid, Antoine Hayden, linebacker from East St. Louis, who's been kind of a soft verbal for Illinois for a while now, and he just got a bump to 4 stars, but and he's a candidate to flip. But I don't. I think if he does flip, I don't think it's going to be to Purdue. I think he's got some SEC schools involved with him now, and some others, and Illinois is still recruiting him right now and making
Mhm.
sure that he's solid for signing day. But I don't think he's a kid that's going to follow Ryan Walters.
And I'm sure you've spoken with Bret Bielema countless times. What did he say about Ryan Walters and just what he meant to Illinois as a program?
Well, it's pretty obvious, right? I mean, their
Mm.
defense carried them this year. They had the number 2 overall defense in the country. He sung the praises of Ryan Walters, and every time he talked about him, and had a statement in the media yesterday about how much he meant to the program. And one thing about Coach Bielema, he does groom guys to become head coaches, and he did that with Ryan Walters. And I think he's disappointed to see him go. He thought maybe they'd get another year out of him, and they did extend his contract and give him a big raise. And he was going to be one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the Big Ten, actually in the country. Making over $1 million a year. So disappointed to see him go, but always talks about it, what Ryan meant to the team and how good of a job he did.
Now talk a little bit about, I know we're gonna hop off here soon, but talk a little bit about the transition of the defense from the year before he got there to obviously this year, like you mentioned, being the number 2 overall defense in the country.
Well, it was striking. I mean, some of these same players were recruited by and developed by Lovie Smith and his staff. And when Bielema and Walters came in, they switched to a 3-4 defense from the 4-3, and they started moving guys around. And they just always seemed to make the right call on putting a kid in a position where he can succeed
Mhm.
and excel at his position. Whether it's moving a down lineman on defense to a stand up outside linebacker, or like moving a guy from wide receiver to corner or to safety, or just this one simple thing like moving a corner from field side to the boundary side corner, things like that. And they became a lot more aggressive. If you watch them on film, they played man coverage. They didn't blitz a ton, but when they did blitz, it was more effective.
Mhm.
Um, they did a lot. They did some zone blitzing. The linebackers would blitz. It was just a overall just a more aggressive approach on defense, whereas Lovie Smith was more a bend but don't break with the cover 2 that he played in 4-3 defense. And I think fans were a little sick of watching the Tampa 2 defense, because it really does seem to be an antiquated defense and not too many teams run anymore. And they made that big change to the 3-4, and it just snowballed from there. And they developed the players. They made really good game day decisions, and you saw the product on the field this year.
Mhm. And then last thing here before I let you go, what can Purdue fans and players and coaches and staff, what can they expect out of Ryan Walters?
You can expect him to be honest, and a straight shooter. He is one of the few coaches that I've covered in my 12 years covering college football that he will give you a direct answer to every question, and unless it's something like giving away game day secrets
Mhm.
or a scouting report or something like that. But you ask him about a player, you ask him about decisions on the field, he's going to give you the straight dope and be honest and open about it. You're going to see a guy who off the field is laid back and cool and low key, and then he from Clark Kent he becomes Superman on the field. He's a motivator, a go getter on the field, and so it's big difference in his personality on and off the field. But you're going to see a guy who's level headed, who's honest, who makes good decisions. And like I said, I think the fans once they get to know him, they're really going to like Ryan a lot.
Mhm. Well, Doug, I can't thank you enough for joining us here. Everybody, go check out Orange and Blue News, part of the Rivals Network, of course, along with Boiler Upload.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.